On Gemara Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Let's get underway. And nice to see everybody here. We've got a nice oilam here. We've got a nice oilam online. Page 47a. So let's see how far we get. This is a little bit, it's not really a new sugya, but it's continuing. The last sugya that we saw was about sitting in the sukkah, not sitting in the sukkah, making the bracha of leishev, not making the bracha of leishev. We concluded Meitiv Yadvinu Bruchi Lamavarchinu. We spent quite a while on it. It's for Shmini Atzeret. Now we're up to the next sugya. Amar Rav Yochanan. So that's the beginning of the line. In fact, it's about a third to a half of the way down the page. Amar Rav Yochanan. Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shel Chag ve'enu Omrim Zman b'Shvii Shel Pesach. As everybody knows, we remind everybody you say Shachianu on the night of Shmini Atzeret and not on the seventh night of Pesach. What's the difference between the two? So we know a lot of differences, but that's because we live a Jewish life. We know that. So okay, but now we're going to see. This is the source. Now we're up to the source for it. So no one understands why it says a small table, but it's cozy. I don't know. I'm sorry. So you have to wear masks, so otherwise wouldn't have to. Okay, speak to management. I just work here. Okay, so really, I have nothing to do with it. I come in and there's fewer tables now. People are uncomfortable. Let's go. Rabbi Levi. So Rabbi Levi says, Rabbi Levi Bar Chama, excuse me, Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina, Teda, Shari Chalak Begimel Dvarim. Three things differentiate the eighth day of Sukkot from the days that came before, the 7 days before. The Sukka, Velulav, and Nisach Hamayim. Rabbi Yehuda de Amar Bilog Haymanasle Kol Shmona. According to the first memory here, three things differentiate. Sukkah, Lulav, and Nisach Hamayim is 7 days. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He thinks the Nisach Hamayim transpired also on the 8th day on Shmini Atzeret. Fine. Yeah. So he had a sheet like that. So Ihachi. So if so, Shvii Shel Pesach, Nami. Right? Why not say 7th day of Pesach? And let me pause here just to point out. The 7th day of Pesach is, many of us know the end of the story. So you have to sort of suspend judgment. Lahavdil, in the same like when you learn a story in Chumash. So it's easy to say, I know how it ends. Yeah, you know how it ends, but we're playing it out. Now you're going to see how it's played out to get to that end point. We know viscerally what some of the things are. We just go around the table, we'll find something to differentiate Shmini Atzeret from the rest of Sukkot. In addition to these three things, we're going to see them now inside. But the 7th day of Pesach is in the case could have been made that it's a separate holiday as well, in as much as it is after a period of Chol HaMoed, a Mikra Kodesh again. Right? It's a Mikra Kodesh. It has a distinct historical event, according to our tradition, that transpired on that day. It's not just tradition, it's a tradition in Torah B'chtav, right? The Kriyat Torah reflects this. The Kriyat Yam Suf is the 7th day of Pesach, Shvii Pesach. There could have been a case, a logical case to be made that since it's Yom Tov, just like the first day is Yom Tov, maybe it's the first time we're experiencing the 7th day of Pesach in a whole year. Maybe it should be another Shachianu, but we don't do that. We maintain it's a continuation of the first 6 days. Also, the case could have been made for Shmini Atzeret to have been a continuation of Sukkot. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, look, you only have Sukkah and Lulav that you don't do, but you certainly do have Nisach Hamayim, so that links it. And of course, Yom HaShmini, Chag HaAtzeret Hazeh means the 8th day. Well, it comes in a sequence. Yeah?
It implies that it's part of Sukkot.
That will be the key. I'm trying to build a case in the backwards. In order to, we come with the end point. We already know what the reality is. So now, if you wanted to, whatever the word is, reverse engineer things, how would it look? Right. If we wanted to build a case in the opposite direction, what are some of the things we would bring up? So that's why we have Ihachi, Shvii Pesach Nami, right? So the Gemara says, no. Harei Chalak Ba'achilat Matzah. The difference is that the first day of Pesach, there is a chiyuv during the first day of Pesach, at least part of the first day of Pesach, to eat matzah. It's really only the first night. And the 7th night, there is no such obligation. But there's a flaw in that argument, of course, which is you have an intervening 6 days where there wasn't a chiyuv. That's where the Gemara is going to go. But it's just we're in the brains of the system. So we're
because in you intervening 6 days, you also didn't say Shehachi. So I mean,
yeah, right. Okay, yeah. But the point is, now that you went back to a Mikra Kodesh, to an Isser Malacha, maybe that differentiates it from what the last time you had an Isser Malacha, which was on day 1, and therefore you need a Shachianu because it's a new time period of prohibition on malacha, and that's what the Gemara is playing out. So again, ihachi shvisha pesach nami hari chaluk ba'achilat matzah. Right, Amar mar laila rishon achova mikan ve'elach reshut. Right, we all know that that's the case. The first night it's an obligation to eat matzah. After that, you only eat matzah if you want to eat bread. You can't eat chametz. Therefore, if you want to eat bread, it has to be matzah. That's your option. You don't have to eat bread. You have to eat matzah. Bread's equivalent, matzah, etc. The Gemara recoils. Hachi hashta? Is that possible? Halta milaila chaluk miyom eino chaluk. Right? Hacha afilu miyom nami chaluk. I mean, what kind of a comparison is this going to be here? You're going to compare the fact that the first night of Pesach and the next day, the next morning, day one, daytime one of Pesach are already differentiated one from the other. The ending came already on the first day. So you want to argue that should be transferred over to the seventh day of Pesach, Shmini Shechianu? No, it's so obvious that that's not true. As opposed to Shmini Atzeret, which is a new declaration. You're already saying Regel B'fnei Atzma, but you're already 2 steps ahead because you know that that's where it's going to go. Right. The Gemara started figuring out, well, is it really Regel B'fnei Atzma? It's not Regel B'fnei Atzma, right? So, but in our case, I feel miyam nami chaluk. It's clearly differentiated from the days before.
You could actually argue that you're high to matzah on the 7th day too, because on Yom Tov you have to have a suda. You can't make a suda with anything else, but. So.
But that's not also the mitzvah. That's good point. That's not the mitzvah of matzah.
Yeah,
it's the mitzvah of Suda that propels it.
Yeah, but there's a link with Pesach where you can't have hummus the whole way through. Sukkah, there's no link between Sukkah and
the 8th day. Right. Davka, it's a 7th day, the seventh day mitzvah that ended. Correct. Therefore, that's a strong what?
No, it's also
Shivat Yamim. Yeah. So that's it seems fairly obvious, right? Miyom eino chaluk, right? So even on the first day, it's all in our case though. Hacha afilu miyom nami chaluk, right? So the Shmini Atzeret is not comparable to the other days of Sukkot, as the other days of Pesach are comparable to the other days of Pesach. Since already day one of Pesach during the daytime, you already don't have the mitzvah of matzah. Ravina Amar. Zeh chaluk mishel fanav, v'zeh chaluk mishel ifnei fanav. He thinks the distinction is that if you look at Rashi here, Rashi on zeh chaluk mishel fanav, Shmini chaluk miyom etmol Shvii eino chaluk ella min harishon. Right, so the 8th day is differentiated from the day that came before it. Why? Because the day before it there was Sukkah and there was lulav. And according to almost everybody, there was just Chamayim, and the 8th day, there's none of that. What's the chiluk between the 7th day? It's not differentiated, except differentiated maybe from the first day, but it's not differentiated from the days before in terms of its mitzvot. You could have said, what about the Isra Malacha? But apparently, Isra Malacha is not going to be enough to bring it about. Rav Papa Amar Rav Papa or Rav Papa Amar. There's a whole discussion here about the Girsa'ot and back and forth and whatever it is. But he says Hacha Ktiv Par. Hatam Ktiv Parim. When it came to Shmini Atzeret, right? Par Echad, Ayil Echad, right? And on the rest of of Sukkot, it's Parim. It moved from the plural to the singular. That's quite a drop. In other words, the sequencing is, how does it go? 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, and it stops, and then it goes down to 1.
Right.
By rights, it should have been 6 if you were really talking about a sequence.
Part of the same part.
Exactly. The flip tells us something. Also, there's 2 Elim and 14 Kvasim each of the days. Then you get to Shmini Atzeret, and it halves. 1 aisle and 7 Kvasim. So that's half. It's a precipitous shift from the first 7 days to day 8 of Sukkot. That's not true on Pesach.
Right.
On Pesach, by the by, there's no distinction between pretty much any of the days. Yeah, that's yeah. Okay, you could fill it in. Everyone knows that. Okay, that was the musical portion of our shir. Now we're going to actually go back to learning. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Hachaktiv Bayom Hatam Ktiv Uvayom. Right, each of the days. Again, that one. Yeah, you'd say like I don't know. What did it say? What did it say on the first day of Sukkot? Did it say Uvayom Harishon? Not my recollection. Bayom Harishon. That's the point. Uvayom, 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 and. But then the fact they went back to the syntax of bayom means it's a new thing. There's a second we went through a couple of links that had to do with mitzvah differentiation. Now we're up to a language differentiation. All right, the language of the Torah, it says this.
I think the language differentiation, the word Atzeret by itself should be a differentiation.
It should be the question. Excellent point. The Art just made the language of the use of the term Atzeret should be enough for reason to say it's a whole new holiday. What's the flaw in that argument? What does it say in the Torah with regard to the seventh day of Pesach? It also says Atzeret. Yeah. I'm going to have to resort to Google to find it quickly for you, but here, Safari, it's going to refer to, you find it also in a Chumash, but that's old fashioned. Why should I bother with that? I could use a computer. So no, I'm just joking around. No, it should be in Vayikra Chav Gimel. So I got to get rid of the English here. It's going to make me crazy. Let me just put in Lashon Kodesh. There we are. And in the description we have here, yeah. No, wrong spot. It's going to be in not in Bamidbar. It's going to be in Devarim and Ted Zion. I think that's where it is. Sheish Jamim Tuchal Matzot Ubayam Shvii Atzeret LaHashem Elokecha Lo Tasem Locha. You find it? Oh, I think you beat me. Perak Tet Zayin Pasuk Chet. Right? It says Ubayam Shvii Atzeret LaHashem Elokecha. Oh, so Atzeret. Okay. Mark this date in your calendar. Found something in Tanakh that Art did not know at the top of his head, and Benny was quiet for too long. Amazing. It's never happened before.
It's page 1020.
1020. You know the lyrics. Okay. That was the humorous part. Now we're back to the actual learning. What's the idea here? That first we had the issue of mitzvahs, differentiation. That's obvious. Now we're up to the korbanot in terms of the language, right? Parim and par. Uvayom and bayom, that it reverts back to bayom. Next one. Rav Ashi Amar Hachaktiv Kamishpat Hatam Ktiv Kamishpatam. On the seventh day of Sukkot, at the end in Parshat Pinchas, where it has all the korbanot, it says Kamishpatam. End. And then it goes back, reverts to the singular Kamishpat on Shmini Atzeret. And therefore, maybe another example. Again, that's Rav Ashi's point. Maybe you want to also say that in support of this idea of Rav Yochanan, that you say a special Shechianu on Shmini Atzeret is a special holiday, right? So, and by the way, I hadn't noticed this previously, but just the nuance of the language now is really striking me much more. If you just hold your finger here, 5 lines up, 6 lines up from the bottom, just go back to the middle of the page. Just listen to the words. Rabbi Yochanan says, we say Zman on the 8th day of the Chag.
Right.
In the formulation to tell us that you're going to say Shechianu, he's telling you it's the 8th day of something else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so
But how-
wouldn't it have been
But
smarter?
It doesn't say Shmini, it doesn't, it's not making a distinction, it's just saying of the Chag.
Yeah,
So it could be.
yeah,
the whole.
because we call it Shmini Atzeret.
In Shechianu itself, we use the word Shmini. Yom HaShmini Chag HaAtzeret HaZeh.
In the Davin. Yeah, right.
So-
That's right.
By the way,
Yom HaShmini Chag Atzeret Atzeret. My point is, Rabbi Yochanan is trying to prove it's a separate, you're going to say Zman, an extra special. He's calling it the Yom HaShmini of the Chag, as opposed to Yom HaShvii of Pesach, which is also called an Atzeret.
Kamishpatam seems like a far-fetched argument to me, because if that were the case, it would say Kamishpatam for all 7 days, and it only says it for the 7 days.
Yeah.
but
You could
that's
just
required for the drasha of the Sukka mind.
also,
Right? By the way,
according to those who hold it, it's a drasha. Yeah.
Right, one of the references to mind, I forgot the other two, it's part of it.
It's v'niskehem unesacheha kimishpatam. Those are the three. 2, 6, and 7. 2, 6, and 7. But no, we're talking about kimishpatam. Never mind. That's another drasha. We're up to another drasha. But don't confuse drashas. That's another drasha. True. But what we're saying here is the point is that the reversion back to Art's point again, the reversion back to the other tense, that it suddenly said Kimishpatam, that's like an end point, and the next day, Yom HaShmini is called Mishpat, because it's again like a standalone day. By the by, in a parallel universe somewhere, there's Shmini Atzeret and Shvii Atzeret. And Shmini Atzeret is the last day of Sukkot, and Shvii Atzeret is the last day of Pesach. I just read you the pasuk. You read the pasuk. Perak Tet Zayin and Sefer Dvarim. Pasuk Chet uses that language, and the language implies that it's also called an Atzeret, right? Okay. What Chazal did, by the way, while we're on the subject, is they called another day Atzeret instead, and that's Shavuot, as the actual Atzeret of the whole Pesach. The Ramban's beautiful idea that it's a massive Chol HaMoed going on from the beginning of Pesach through until Shavuot. It's beautiful, so that's they called it Atzeret. The Torah doesn't call Shavuot Atzeret per se. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Parim. No, sorry, I made a mistake. Leim Saile, Haparim, Ha'ilim, the Hakvasim Ma'akvin Zed Zed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Parim Ein Ma'akvin Zed Zed. Shemit Matin the Holchin. Let's say that the following dispute between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda is also helping Rabbi Yochanan's case, which is the Chachamim hold that if you don't have the requisite number of Parim, Elim, or Kvasim on any day of Sukkot, you can't give the Korban on that day. So it's 2 Elim and 14 Kvasim every day. You can't have an incorrect number. And they also, the Chachamim maintain, you have to have the correct number of Parim. 13, 12, 11, 10, right? But according to Rabbi Yehuda, since the days shift around anyway, day 1 is 13 and day 7 is, 7? So 7. So, okay, so if you don't have the right number of parim on a given day, you made a mistake or whatever, doesn't matter. You can go ahead and give. They're not me'akev, certainly not the parim. The parim are not. They didn't agree. Amru lo, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, v'halo kulamit matin v'holchin, all right, b'shmini. But what about on the 8th day? On the 8th day, they all change. Right. 1 par, 1 ayil, and 7 kvasim. Everything is cut down to size. So Amar Lahen, Rabbi Yehuda said to them, Shmini, regel b'fnei atzmohu. Shmini is its own holiday. Keshem sheshivat yimei achag te'unin, korban, v'shir, ubracha, v'lina, 4 things. Just as the 7 days of the holiday require a korban that's unique to it, a shear that's unique to it, a bracha that is unique to it. That word bracha, we're going to circle. What did he mean by bracha? And the assumption of the Gemara at this moment, which is about to be challenged, is that the word bracha means shachianu. We're going to see that ends up not being the case, but that's why they're reducing this possibly as a proof. Let's say that Rabbi Yehuda argues here is supporting Rabbi Yochanan's point that there's a separate bracha of shachianu on the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. Rabbi Yehuda even said it, right? And the Chachamim were not challenging this. In other words, what's the machloket in this little piece that we're up to here? We stepped into a little room where we're seeing this back and forth. Chachamim say all of the korbanot li'ikuva. The Rabbi Yehuda says, well, not all, because parim shift every single day. So they say to him, yeah, but they all shift on Shmini Atzeret, and no one's going to tell you on Shmini Atzeret you don't have to have the requisite number of korbanot. It doesn't matter. Of course it does, right? So he says to them, yeah, but just as there are various things that are required on the 7 days of the holiday, so too are those things required on Shmini Atzeret to show that it's a regel b'fnei atzmo. Korban, that's unique. Shear, that's unique, right? Now, what is the shear? I'm glad you asked. Look at Rashi. We'll go straight to Rashi. Actually, we should read Rashi. Where are we? Third line in Rashi, in the wide lines of Rashi. Regel b'fnei atzmo. You see that? Ve'ein korban tov bichlal kishar korbanot echag. Ve'ein lemedin him edel korbanot echag. The truth is, says Rabbi Yehuda to the Chachamim, Shmini Atzeret is its own holiday. We don't learn about the korbanot from Shmini Atzeret based on the other days that came before, because it's a drop from 7 down to 1. So that right there. And it's a drop from 2 Elim to 1 and from 14 Kvasim to 7. So it's not that standalone. So therefore we say Tu'unin korbanot, our Gemara says korban, le'atzman, avzeh korban le'atzmo, ve'enu miseder ha'acherim. It has its own sequence of korbanot. Shear, what's the shear? Shalvim omri b'korbanot shmini, Eino miseder shir hachag. The order of the songs that the Levim would sing on the korbanot on Shmini Atzeret was not the same type of songs they sang during the other days of Yom Tov. What does he mean? And by the way, Rashi admits to us here, V'lo piresh li shir shel Shmini. He says, I don't know what the actual song on the 8th day was.
The 12th Psalm.
Well, there's a back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, there is a back and forth in other sources where Rashi seems to say that he does think there is an actual. We do know what it is. If you look at the Masorah Shas, he says, "Go see Rashi in Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled in the name of Masechet Sofrim." There it quotes, I don't remember, Psalm 12, Psalm 8, something like that. So it's quoting from another pasuk. And Aval, but it's the song, by the way. It's Shminit. Something like Shminit. Shminit. So it's either parak 6. I don't know.
No, 12.
12. I take your word, whatever you say. Okay, no, I don't really know. Okay, Aval Shir Shel Chag Mefurish B'Hachalil. But the song that is going to be sung in each of the days of Sukkot, that's told to us in Parak HaChalil. We're going to get there. That's next parak in page 55. Binu ba'arim ba'am v'chulei havu Hashem, etc. Each day we're going to learn what those songs are when we get there. Kulan remuzim al iske matnot aniyim. All of those songs are somehow hints about the importance of giving to the poor. Mipnei shezman asifahu ve'elitin leket shicha upei umasr sheyishmu sheyishmu mafrishim v'yafrishu ba'ayin yafeh. It's a time of ingathering of the harvest. So the leket, shicha, and peah, the various gleanings, leftover bundles and corner of the field, and your tithes, everyone who is going to show up at the Beit HaMikdash should hear that's the theme song and remind themselves, I have to be generous in what I give with an ayin yafeh, not to give stingy amounts, but to give nice amounts. What is, you understand? That's the shir. Bracha, mefarish va'azumayhi. I don't want to tell you, Rashi says it's coming up, coming attractions, but that's what this whole thing turns on. What does the word bracha mean? If the word bracha means shachianu, this is a great support for Rabbi Yochanan, because when Rabbi Yehuda said to the Chachamim, excuse me, dear rabbis, but on the 8th day, we have the following 4 things that are the same characteristics that are also required of the other 7 days. He listed them off. One of them was the word bracha, and they didn't say boo to him like, what? The bracha is the same. They should have said the bracha is the same, but they didn't. They didn't question it, which implies they accepted that he was telling this differentiation day 8 with the other days. So we'll see that in a minute. Velina, what's Lina? Lalun Laila Shel Motze Yom Tov Harishon B'Yerushalayim. That when Yom Tov ended, it was a 1-day Yom Tov on of Sukkot, you don't go home. The Gamrin Pesach. We learn it from Pesach and Parak Tet Zayin. When do we read this? Always at the end of the Yom Tov, except on Shavuot when that's all we got. So it's the end of the Yom Tov. It's right there. That's the saying, right? We parse it from Re'eh, Aser Taser, Kol V'chor, but Aser Taser Shmini Atzeret. But either way, we always read Ufanita Baboker V'lachta L'Lecha. Right? You'll get in the morning, you'll turn in the morning, you'll turn in the morning and you go out to your tent. Right? It's not the day of Yom Tov that you go turn around and go home. You have your mechuyev that day to show up. So you can go home. So therefore, the Kaf Piris, the Parakam Rosh Hashanah, Leira Od Bazara, De Lahavi Olat Re'iyah. Right? So it must be you're going to go on Chol HaMoed. But it says to do so in the morning. Alma, therefore, therefore you have to stay overnight in the city. And therefore we learn, if you didn't bring your korban chagiga on the first day, ran out of time, came late, whatever it is, you're going to do it on Chol HaMoed. That night you have to stay over in Yerushalayim. You don't turn and run away. Stay the night. So that's Lina. So there's an element of Lina also, and that's the last line here, and back in the Gemara now. Af Shmini Taon Korban V'Shir Ubracha V'Lina. Okay, some of this is going to be challenged. The Gemara says, well, now that we've brought this up, my love Zman, isn't the bracha being referenced here by Rabbi Yehuda Zman, which would support Rabbi Yochanan's contention? First Rashi on the page, very important. My love Zman. Hach baracha de kam Rabbi Yehuda. Ma'hi love hainu zman la'atzmo. When he said the word bracha, didn't he really just mean zman, meaning shachianu? The Gemara says no. Lo birkat hamazon tefila. No. He said bracha. He meant what you're going to say in benching and in davening. Yom HaShmini Chag Atzeret Hazeh, as opposed to Chag HaSukkot. That's what he meant. He didn't mean Shechianu. Yeah. Birkat HaMazon, look at the second line of Rashi. Rashi, second line. Birkat HaMazon, Da'ad Hashta Amrina Yom Chag HaSukkot Hazeh. V'kan et Yom Shmini Chag Atzeret Hazeh. Right? They're different girsot.
Yeah.
Some of us have whatever. Okay, we all have different girsot. We're going to come to it again on Mem Chadam Al, so we'll talk about it there. Right? So now back to the Gemara. The Gemara ended the first line in the Gemara, Mem Zayin 47b. Hachinami mistabra. This also makes sense. The Isal Kedait of Zman kol shiva mi'ika. Because when you talk, if you're really talking about when bracha really means Zman, you can't say Shechianu every single day of Sukkot. You say one time, the first day. So the Gemara says, well, no, halo kasha. Dilo arecha'idna mevarach lamachar oliyam achrina. Right? You forgot the first day, so you make the bracha the next day, Shechianu. You make the bracha on another day, whatever day it's going to be, whatever it's going to be. Right? So the Gemara, however, says, yeah, wait a minute. Mikol makom kos ba'inan, but you do need a cup to do it. So how's that ever going to happen on Chol HaMoed? How could the word bracha refer to Shechianu when you don't have a kos? You only have a kos on the first night. People didn't have the ability to have kosot the rest of the holiday generally. Look at the third line in Rashi. Hold your finger in the Gemara. Look in the Rashi. Third line in Rashi. Mikol makom heichi mishkachat lezman b'chol shel moed v'afilu birach yom hakama. Even if you didn't make the bracha on the earlier days, haba'ina kos shel yayin ve'ein yayin matzah l'chol adam chol shel moed. And most people don't have a cup of wine on Chol HaMoed, and therefore not going to really just make the bracha stam standing in the shuk, unless you're Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman holds in the shuk. These are certain analogs here also, by the way, to Hanukkah. It's interesting. They could say the Shechianu, maybe, remember the first night, if you see the Hanukkah candles, you could say, Rabbi, we're done with Hanukkah, don't bring it up again, but we're early for next year. You see the Hanukkah candles, you're standing outside, you're not going to light yourself, you say the bracha, Shas Nisim, you say the bracha Shechianu, you're standing in the shuk. Rav Nachman thought that you could stand in the shuk and say Shechianu on Sukkot as well. It's not going to be accepted, but without a kos,
Even on Chol HaMoed?
yeah, that's what it sounds like. So Levi Messiah Rav Nachman. To Amar Rav Nachman, Zman Omer Afilu Bashuk. Diamart Be'inan Kos. If you're going to say that you need a cup in order to do it, Kos Kol Yom Me'ika. Does a person have a kos any old day of the holiday? So the answer is Dilma de Iklale Kos. Maybe the couple show up. Maybe something happened where you did get it. If you would get the cup, so then maybe, according to Rav Nachman, you'd say the bracha wherever you are. But it can't be your mom standing in the shuk.
Right.
Rav Nachman is not getting support from Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said bracha means Zman, so maybe Zman, but only Holocaust. And we're basically saying, no, the word bracha here means what you say in Shmini Esrei, what we say in Birkat HaMazon, not what you say with Kiddush of the Shechianu. It doesn't obtain. So that's as far as the word bracha. Then we get to a little excursus now on the subject of lina, sleeping over. V'sava Rabbi Yehuda Shmini ta'un lina. Rabbi Yehuda, is he of the opinion that Shmini requires lina? Now, why is this a bit of a question? Pesach requires lina. Sukkot requires lina. But because they are 7-day holidays, and because the day after the holiday is also a holiday, it's a Chol HaMoed. So once you're in the zone of a holiday that has a first day and then a 6-day tail that comes after it, that's really what it is, right? Sukkot, Pesach, and then the Chol HaMoed days. Therefore, there's an idea of lina that exists because you went through a Moed. But is that always true if you had a 1-day festival? What about Shavuot? Is it true for Shavuot that there's an obligation of lina? Technically, how would it play out? You finish Yom Tov and maybe you could go home that night. Now, then we say you don't, because you have to give a korban olat re'iyah. But when do you have to give a korban olat re'iyah? Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. What's not on the list? Shmini Atzeret. So maybe Shmini Atzeret, even though it has a special korban that is being given a korban tzibur, and maybe there are indeed shalmei simcha, what are called shlamim, that individuals have to give in order to observe the holiday. It's not an olat re'iyah, because there's no mitzvah of aliyah l'regel on Shmini Atzeret. It was part of Sukkot. You happen to be in town already. Yeah. So maybe there's no mitzvah of lina on Shmini Atzeret itself. What the Gemara is going to try to do is say, does Rabbi Yehuda really agree himself that there's a notion of lina on the conclusion of Shmini Atzeret on that night. Is that so clear? Remember, because previously he said, just as there's Lina for Sukkot, so too there is for Shmini Atzeret. Wait a second, stop the press. We're going to show a source now where Rabbi Yehuda himself says there's no chiyuv Lina after the giving of a korban, which is of a festive nature. And what is that? Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni, a month after Pesach,
Right.
does not have certain mitzvahs of Pesach, but it does the korban Pesach, let's say.
Korban Pesach,
It has a korban Pesach, but because it's not associated with Kedushat Hayom, there's no Yom Tov associated with it. There's no mitzvah of aliyah l'regel for it. Just mean that you have to go there because you have to go. There's no korban olat riyah. You bring korban Pesach. Maybe it doesn't obtain. That's Rabbi Yehuda's contention. For Pesach Sheni, there's no lina. If that's true, maybe that's also should be true for Shmini Atzeret as well. So again, this is like a little bit of a tangent, but the point is trying to understand when Rabbi Yehuda wanted to say, no, the same way that you have the following things that are obligated for on Sukkot, so too you're obligated for them on Shmini Atzeret. You know why? It's a regel bifnei atzmo. Well, he doesn't hold this aliyah l'regel on Shmini Atzeret. So how could he hold this a mitzvah of lina Shmini Atzeret? He said it. He's the one who said it. So how does that compute? And that's why we say v'savar Rabbi Yehuda Shmini ta'on lina v'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda omer minay lePesach Sheni she'enu ta'on lina. How do we know that Pesach Sheni does not require lina? Shenemar ufanita aboker v'halachta olecha. That you get up in the morning and you go on your way. You already opened it. Okay. So I'm sorry, I should have given out chumash. We really should have had chumash. It would be better. Okay. Yeah, this probably requires chumashim. So otherwise, we're gonna tie ourselves up in knots. The Torah presents the Yom Tovim several times in the Torah, in several places. In one of those places in Parsha Re'eh, it mentions a strange thing about the obligation of eating matzah. It tells the obligation to eat matzah is 6 days long. In one place in the Torah, it says it's 7 days long. In another place in the Torah, it says and here in Re'eh, it says it's 6 days long. So I thought you told me it's only the first night you have to eat it. The Gemara has a whole drush on Masechet Pesachim on Kuf Chaf. I think Rashi quotes it here. That essentially says that we learn from the. I don't want to go into the machinery of it. It's what teaches us the first day is the first night. It's a chiyuv and a chova, and the rest of the time it's a reshut. When it says to eat it, the 6 days doesn't mean literally you have to eat it. It means if you want to eat bread, you'll have to eat matzah. If you need to have your Yom Tov meal, you'll have to with matzah because you don't have a choice. So the pasuk that tells us about going home, about packing up and going home, goes like this: Uvishalta v'chalta b'makom asher yivcha Hashem Elokecha bo, ufanita v'boker v'alachta leholecha. Sheshit yamim tochal matzot u'b'mashvi Atzeret Hashem Elokecha lo ta'aseh melacha. So the words flow one into the other. Get up and go home and go to your tent the next morning, meaning the morning after you've given the korban, whenever that day was. And when is that? That's a case where there is another 6 days of a holiday that follow, i.e. Pesach. Day one is Yom Tov, and the other 6 days are not like the first day. The Aliyah the Regel obligation, if you discharged it, is discharged. It so happens, P.S., the end of the holiday, day 7, is again going to be a day with the obligation of Isser Malacha. I'm taking out my phone because I realized I was remiss. I should have announced at the beginning. I did have it in mind at the beginning of the shir, but I didn't mention it. So tonight's shir is sponsored by Deanne Bassett. We thank her very much. Sponsoring commemoration of the Yurtzit of her dear parents, Hitzel Bat Avram and Avram Heschel ben Shmuel. Shlomo should have an aliyah. I should have mentioned at the beginning. Okay, so he says here. I interrupted myself. V'hatani Rabbi Yehuda Omer minayin lePesach Sheni Sheino Ton Lina Shenemar ufanita b'boker v'alachta lecha. When does the rule obtain that you get up the next morning after the korban and you go to your tent? In a case where the next words are Sheshet Yamim Tochal Matzot Etcheton Shisha Ton Lina Etcheino Ton Shisha Eino Ton Lina. If it doesn't have a 6 day, I'm calling it for colloquial purposes a 6 day tail that follows it, Pesach and Sukkot. So then maybe there's no issue with Lina. By the way, the Chacham disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. They hold that anytime there's a Yom Tov, it seems, the Yom Tov itself, a day of Kodesh. So the same thing would be true for Shavuot. L'may nafkamina, Motzei Shavuot at night, you can't leave. You gotta wait till the next morning.
You have 7 days to.
Tashlumin.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though they don't have Kedusha. There's no Chol Hamoed there. Yeah. Although we don't say Tachno in many of our shuls, but okay. Yeah, okay. So
Well, on Shavuot, they hung around because there just wasn't time to give everybody's korban in one day anyway. I mean,
yeah.
Well, practically speaking, who's gonna leave at night after Shavuos Hay, or gonna stay?
You do all this stuff. and you have-
Yeah. You fly out.
They're playing so good.
They got-
Fine, you get it, Shay Roots.
It's not safe necessarily. It's not safe. That's true. It's not safe, but it doesn't have to be such a far journey. Maybe it's just like go right outside of Yerushalayim, like, you know,
Next village out.
the next village out. Yeah. Yeah. You know,
As soon as Yom Tov is over, you can't,
I'm saying, yeah, okay.
right.
But yeah, we're talking about anyway. So the Gemara here says Lemute Mai. What does this come to minimize? What's being excluded? Lav Lemute Nami Shmini Shel Chag. Right? Maybe the fact that it's going out of its way to tell you it has to have 6 extra days in addition to the one. 6 plus 1 is still 7. What about 8? So maybe that's specifically to be excluded. Lo Lemute Pesach Sheni.
Oh,
Yeah, the kavate, because Pesach Sheni is just is similar. So hachinami, right, something like it. So hachinami mistabra, right? It's none. So okay, so let's say another example. Let's talk about bikurim, right? And lina with regard to bikurim. Person brings the bikurim. They put one of the Zion minim into as it becomes available into the basket. Carry it to Yerushalayim. And what do we learn? It's not a bikurim tu'unin korban. Vishir, Utnufa, Velina. Right? They also require that. There's a korban you bring with it. There's a korban shlamim. There's a specific song. What song? So that's Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid. There's a song. The tenufa, the waving that's going to take place, right? At that time, Velina, and you're gonna stay over. Yeah. Okay. So here we go again. Man shamat lei de Amar Tenufa, Rabbi Yehuda. All right. Who's the one who brought this up about the idea that you require Tenufa? Who is the author of this in the Mishnah? Isn't it Rabbi Yehuda? We're going to explain. We don't know where did we mention Rabbi Yehuda? We just mentioned a few words over here. A Mishnah from Bikurim. This is Rabbi Yehuda. We're about to learn the piece from Rabbi Yehuda, but it's about to say Exhibit A. Here's where Rabbi Yehuda said it. So he says, well, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who talks about Tenufa. And there, what did he also say? It requires Lina. See? Lina. So when you bring the Bikurim, it's not necessarily on the time of a Yom Tov, and yet there's Lina. Wasn't Rabbi Yehuda the one who was saying that, I mean, this would also support the idea that maybe there's no Lina for Pesach Sheni, but there is Lina for other days which also do not have a 7-day festival associated with them, such as Shmini Atzeret, such as Bikurim. Bikurim doesn't have a Kedusha Hayom, right? So Ditanya, as we learned in a Braita, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, V'hinachto zot nufa, right? When the Torah uses the expression V'hinachto, it refers to, there's 2 times, it says first V'hinicho, and then it says V'hinachto later on, in the same parsha, the parsha of Bikurim. Right? So v'lakacha kohen atenem yadecha v'hinicho lifnei mizbach Hashem lokecha in parsha Kitavo. The kohen takes the basket from your hands and places it in front of the mizbech of Hashem your God. And then later on, what does it say? V'ata hine hiveti et reshit pri ha'adama asher natata li Hashem v'hinachto lifnei Hashem lokecha v'shtachavito lifnei Hashem lokecha. So a second time, the placing. There's a limud that the placing, the second time, not literally the placing. You placed something. So what are you placing the second time? Because the first time you're putting it down. The second time, you're waving it around and putting it down. Waving it around. Like this and like this. Front and center, up, down. Yeah? Ata omer zutnufa, o eino elahanacha. Mamash. Do you really mean it means waving? Maybe it means just putting it down. So the Braita clarifies. Kishu omer v'hinicho hare hanacha amor. That's putting it down. Ha mani mekayim v'hinachto zutnufa. That's the waving. The point being that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that you require tenufa. Therefore, the Mishnah in Bikurim that said tenufa and lina must refer to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds you need tenufa, the waving. And since he holds you need the waving, he also must be the author of the same Mishnah that requires lina. So there's another example of where Rabbi Yehuda says you need lina, you have to stay an extra night in Yerushalayim, not related to 7-day holidays. Bikurim, I'm doing it backwards. Bikurim, not Pesach Sheni, but yes, Shmini Atzeret.
The Pesach Sheni is not a Yom Tov, not a.
No.
not-
Doesn't have
everything
mi-
else is what
You're bringing a korban.
and
You're bringing a korban.
and all the other-
Right.
Bring the Pesach korban, basically, and
Right.
And you eat matzah and maror.
But then lean has something to do with it, you're just coming off of a day of no malacha.
Possibly, except that Bikurim would seem to disprove it because Bikurim is not a day that you can't do malacha. But it seems to have to do with the fact that you gave a korban of a shlamim korban, not Pesach, not korban Pesach. That's in its own category. It's something. It seems to be separate. A shlamim offering, Bikurim shlamim offering, and Shmini Atzeret shalmei simcha. So that's what triggers it. If not the kedusha hayom itself. Because there's no Kiddush Yom for Bikurim. It's a weekday when you show up.
Right.
So the Gemara says, yeah, that's not such a good proof. You know why? Because that Mishnah could have also been authored by Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. V'dilma Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. He Tanya v'lakacha kohen atenam yadecha limeid al Bikurim shetuunin tenufa. Di Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. We have another expression from someone else who also thinks you need tenufa. So my Talmud Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov atya yad mishlamim. He even learned the idea of tenufa from the world of shlamim. It uses the word yad for shlamim, and it uses the word yad miyadecha for bikurim. So ktiv hachav lakacha kohen atena miyadecha ktiv hatam yadav tiviena et ishei Hashem makan kohen af lahalan kohen umalahalan bailim af kan bailim. All right. So to say it in one sentence, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov says that both in the world of Bikurim and the world of Korbanot, there's a waving that's going to go on of that which you bring, whether it's, in the first case, the fruits in the basket, or, case of the Korban itself. And it turns out the waving transpires not only by the Kohen, but by the owner as well. Both of them have to. So Malahal and Bailim, Afkan Bad. So how does it actually work? How does that work practically? Kohen Maniach Yado Tachat Yad Bailim. The Kohen places his hand under the hand of the owners of the korban, umenif, and they wave it. When it comes to bikurim, the description seems to be that well, you could see it in Rashi. He says the person takes out their shoulder and they hold the basket by the lip of the basket, and then the Kohen puts his hands underneath it and they're waving it together. The basket. When it's the korbanot, so the hands are underneath and the hands go underneath the hands and they wave it together, right? And that's the transfer. Rashi here said toward the bottom over here, tachat yad habaylim, baylim ochsim bisfata tena v'kohen maniach yadav tachat shulav. That's how it describes, right? And this is a little bit of an excursus, but the point is to say, where am I here? Back into the Gemara. All right. My Talmud Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, I'm reading again. Atya yad mishlamim. There's a connection, Xerah between yad and yad in two different contexts. Bikurim and shlamim. Ktiv hacha in the world of bikurim, from your hands. Uchtiv hatam, and it says with regard to korbanot, yadav tiviena et yishei Hashem. Makan kohen, af lahalan kohen. Umalahalan bailim, af kan bailim. In one case, it talks about the kohen doing the waving. In the other case, it talks about the bailim doing the waving. The truth is, they're both going to do both, right? So how does it work? Kohen maniach yado tachat yad bailim umenif, and it moves it around. Okay, and the point here is to say this whole excursus is just to say you can't really prove that Rabbi Yehuda holds you need lina for bikurim alone, and therefore he wrote the Mishnah. He's the author of the Mishnah about tenufa and lina with regard to bikurim. It's not so clear. Yeah, it's left sort of question marks, like left unanswered. We tried to prove it. It didn't work. It didn't work. We're left with this sort of this question, like, oh, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need lina after Shmini Atzeret? Yes. Yeah, that's where we're going to leave it. So now the Gemara sort of circles back to our original topic, 4 lines up from the bottom. My hava Allah. Okay, practically, like, what do we do about saying Shmini Atzeret, yes or no? Rav Nachman Amar, Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shel Chag. Rav Sheshet Amar, Ein Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shel Chag. V'Hilchata, the halacha is, Omrim Zman b'Shmini Shel Chag. We do say Shechianu on Shmini Atzeret. 2-3 lines more. We'll explain them more next time. We'll just get to the Mishnah since we're already here. Tanakivat of Rav Nachman, and this dovetails with Rav Nachman's statement, which is Shmini. Next page. Mem Chedem Aleph. Rega b'fnei atzmo le'inyan pazar kashav. It is its own holiday for 6 things. Pazar kashav. We just had this on Shmini Atzeret. What is pazar kashav? You wonder. Keep going to the Gemara. Pei pais. bifnei atzmo, pais bifnei atzmo, Rashi, top line, shebechol, end of the line. Shebechol parei achag, lo yimatulin pais. For all of the many korbanot, especially the bulls on Sukkot, there was no need to have a lottery. Eza mishmar yakriv. Why? Lefi shebeseder hayimakriv in otan, achikol chavdal mishmar shanot, umishal shod bahen, chutz mishtayim. Right? There would be the cycle, 24 mishmar, everybody, all hands on deck for Sukkot. All 24 units of Kohanim had to be in Yerushalayim. They're working. Everyone would get a chance because there's so many offerings. There's 70 bulls. A lot of opportunities. Okay? Everybody got it, right? And they would double, and except for 2 that didn't get to. But they had to do a lottery for the bull. Again, they had no choice. For Shmini Atzeret, there's only 1, right? Next. Zman bifnei atzmo, shachianu by itself. Regel bifnei atzmo means, Rashi says that we don't sit in the sukkah. Korban bifnei atzmo, it's its own korban. Well, we understand that. We talked about that extensively. Shira bifnei atzmo, it's got its own song. We also talked about that has some kind of other song that's being sung. We talked about what that might be. And bracha bifnei atzmo has its own bracha. What's that? Yom Shmini, etc. There's a little piece here in Rashi. We'll leave it for next time, and we'll open a discussion there. The Tosfot, we'll see things more in depth. God willing, next week, and health and happiness. Wish everyone a great night. Zagazon.